Welcome back to Dev for Designers, and today we're going to get you set up to start writing code in 8 minutes. And bear with me, because as much as I would love to hop in and start dissecting dribble shots, picking apart awards websites, and all of that good stuff to rebuild with you all, I think there's a few things we should cover first, so let's dive into it. First things first, HTML, hypertext markup language. Essentially the building blocks of all of the websites that you all have ever been to, used, interacted with. It is everywhere. And it consists of tags. HTML tags, there's a bunch of different ones which we'll cover later on in the lessons, but they all have an opening tag and a closing tag with some sort of content in the middle. Inside of these opening tags, you'll also notice what are called attributes. Attributes can be a variety of things, but they all have a name and a value, and a lot of times are used to select and style elements through CSS, link images, source actual links for where to go when you click something, and a lot of other things as well. And next we have the document object model. It's essentially a giant tree of all the HTML that goes into your website. So every element or node or tag in the DOM has a familial relationship to all of the other elements around it, which is important for a lot of things, but one of which that we'll cover is selecting things for sure within CSS, looking at specificity and all that good stuff. But every tag can be a child, it can be a parent, and it can also be a sibling to any other tag that is in the DOM surrounding it. So for all you designers out there who like to think in terms of Figma, this is the same thing as your layers panel. You'll see there's a section with a navigation inside of it, with 2 paragraphs inside of that navigation. And is this the correct way to build a navigation in HTML? Probably not. But for the sake of explaining this, it's essentially just frames. You can nest a frame inside of another frame, and you can nest elements inside of that other frame. So this is the same way that HTML works under the hood. And next we have my favorite part, CSS, cascading style sheets, which is essentially the bread and butter of what tells elements how to appear within the DOM. We do this by selectors, and there's a few different ways that you can select an item in CSS, which we're going to do a demo here in a few moments, but one of which is by the tag itself. So you could say all paragraph tags. You could select it calling back to the attributes by its class, and then you could also select it by its ID, which is, in this example, a taco that has a class of hard shell, and then the value is the taco. So you could select it through any one of these ways. Now that you're an HTML and CSS expert, you may be thinking, where can I write code? How do I see the output of it? And how do I get on my feet? So that's what we're going to take a look at next. I have 2 recommendations, and let's hop into those. So the first recommendation I have for you all is a site called Codepen.io. It's a great free resource that has a lot of different users, a great community, and it's a very easy place to start coding. There's no setup required under the hood. You don't have to tell things where to go. You can literally click a button and start coding. So if you're looking to write your first tags, this is my best recommendation on a starting point. But if you're more of a do-it-yourselfer, if you like to get in the weeds and you like to figure things out on your own, later on in lessons, you'll see me using this a lot. This is Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to link both of these down below in the description. But this is a great IDE to really get going and really have a customized experience when you're writing code. So I'll talk a little bit more about my setup for this later, but let's hop into some Codepen. And you'll see over here in Codepen, there's 3 things. You can drag and kind of move these however you'd like. You can open and close them. It's just got a place for your JavaScript, which I'm going to keep closed for now because we're not going to be doing any of that. You've got some CSS, which I've written some prerequisite styles here just to make my background black because we're designers and we code in dark mode. So that's what we're going to be doing. All right, let's add our first element to the DOM, which is going to be a paragraph tag. And the quick way to do that is by typing P and then clicking Tab on your keyboard. Instead of having to opening and close every tag. You can do this with all of them. You'll see me do this a lot in some of the stuff moving forward, but it is the type of tag that you are looking to add followed by tab, and it'll open it and close it for you. And let's say I'm a designer, ... who codes? Smiley face. All right, and that's our first bit of code. And you may be thinking, this is black and white. This is boring. How do I style this? Well, let's tie in some of that CSS that we just learned and see how we can style this paragraph tag on the page. And there's a few ways to do it, one of which is by the element. So it is a P tag. So we can type in a P, we can have some curly brackets, and then we return. So in the middle here, we're looking at maybe a color. We want to add a different color. What do we want to do? Let's do pink. Pink feels right. And you'll notice the object changes colors. So looking at CSS, it is always red from top to bottom. It is cascading. So if you declare something twice in your file, say I've got a paragraph here, and then I want to select my paragraph again and tell it to be a different color, can you guess what's going to happen? If I say this is going to be orange, this is going to override the style that is on top of it. And this is important to remember if you're ever troubleshooting something, if you ever have something declared more than once. But a way that we can avoid this is through specificity. And there's a lot of ways to go about specificity, but I'm going to recall back to the intro to HTML. We're going to add an attribute or a class name to this paragraph. So you do that, type in class equals, and then quotes. And let's just call this hero text for now. Naming is a whole nother topic, but we can choose to call this whatever we want. So to target a class, we're going to put this at the bottom. Underneath all the other ones, you would have a period, you would have your value. So for me, it's hero text, and then you would have your curly brackets. So let's say we actually want this color to be teal. And this is going to override the other ones, not only because it is on the bottom, but because it is more specific. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to place it above it, because remember we said it's red from top to bottom. So the bottom one should always be respected. It should always be what happens. And if you'll notice, this changed back to teal. And that is because class selectors are more specific than a tag selector is. And something to consider, or something to keep in mind as you're starting to write CSS, is that it's not a logic-based language. So you'll have things on top of things that work, and sometimes they won't. And that's part of the fun of troubleshooting this. All right, I know that may not have been as glamorous as some of you were expecting, but that's all right, because I think before we really dive into things, it was important just to get a base knowledge of HTML, of CSS, how to select things, how it all works together. And I promise moving forward, next week we're going to start diving into some fun stuff. We're going to take a look, maybe grab some dribble shots, start breaking them down, dissecting them, rebuilding them, and then taking it, you know, from design all the way to development. And if you find any of this information useful, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. It would help me out, and it would also help other people kind of discover this content as we go if you really do find it valuable. But if you've made it this far, thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next week.